With permission of the Chair and the Finance Minister, welcome everyone to this virtual event organized by the Institute for Policy Reforms. For over a year, we've held online discussions to highlight policy issues of critical importance to the country in our region. Today, we will discuss the soon-to-be announced budget in this meeting titled Budget 2022, Balancing Stability and Growth. My name is Ashraf Hayat. I'm Executive Director at the Institute. A deep thanks to all for joining, and especially our speaker, the Honorable Finance Minister, Mr. Shaukat Tareem. We will begin with a recitation from the Holy Quran. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina siratal mustaqim siratal lazina. Anamta alayhim ghairil maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. Once again, welcome. We look forward to an informed discussion on the parameters of the coming budget and on government's strategy to combat years of economic frailty, external dependence, and uneven growth. I know this will be a consequential discussion, also because we may gain insight into government's policy response to the multitude of challenges that are faced both by government and the people of Pakistan. We begin with introductory comments from Mr. Humayun Akhtar Khan. Humayun Saab has been in public service for over 30 years. In 4 general elections, he was elected as Member National Assembly, during which period he was also Commerce Minister of Pakistan and Chairman BOI Minister of State for Investment. Among his many interests, Mr. Khan is also CEO and chairperson of this institute and a source of inspiration for all of us who work here. Establishing this institute is a manifestation of his deep commitment to making public policy and public institutions work for all Pakistanis. I request Humayun Saab for his welcome comments and for introducing today's topic. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Ashraf Saab. I wish to thank the Finance Minister to find the time. We all know how busy he is at the moment in this very challenging assignment and the budget time. And of course, I would like to thank our valued participants who their participation is a source of encouragement for IPR. The Finance Minister will, I'm sure, go at length to describe the current state of the economy and what he intends to do in taking it forward. And therefore, rather than just talking about that, I just thought that I should briefly talk about what has been happening to Pakistan's economy over the last, let's say, 20 years. And that's a good period because it covers various governments. So the whole political spectrum is covered in that time. So one thing, our economy has always been close to default during this time, and the current account deficit always being in deficit. Look, current account deficit 1.5%, 2%, 1% is accepted, and that's not a issue for economists. But leaving a current account deficit at 6.5%, which was the case in 2018, is quite precarious for the economy. And this has happened despite, I will describe later, the kind of aid we have been getting during this time. And despite aid, we have been facing current account deficits, and that is quite unusual. Just give an example. In the last 20 years, there have been just 3 years where the current account has not been in deficit. The other trend that we constantly see, and I've always failed to understand, and when I have been in government, have been in perpetual arguments with finance ministers, and I know that the finance Shaukat Tareen shares my view on this, that the rupee for some reason is always kept overvalued, and that creates a general euphoria because the imports get cheap, and all the food items that are imported, oil, it gets cheap, and creates a feeling of goodwill. But that's always short-lived and temporary, because while the imports are getting cheap because of overvaluation of rupee, the exports are getting more expensive, and that is why we end up in the IMF the number of times that we have ended up with them. And the third trend that I see is the external debt continues to grow. Let me just give you a figure. Over the last 20 years, our debt has increased 3 times, 200%, the external debt. And therefore, the external debt, the debt servicing charge is the largest expenditure in our fiscal account right now, and continues to increase. In fact, our external debt servicing is almost twice the size of our public sector development program right now. So very clearly, and we don't spend this debt on projects that create foreign exchange. We basically spend this external debt to pay past debts, and that's it. In the last 20 years, we have spent 2/3 of our external debt on a budget and balance of payment, and 1/3 on development. And then there's no way we will be able to return this debt. And that is why we keep going back and take fresh external debt to pay back past debts. And the past debt, the debt stock of the country doesn't reduce, it keeps increasing despite that. So, I mean, whichever government is in power will continue to blame the past, but will have to borrow more than the past governments just to pay and service the past debt which has been accumulated, and which many times has not been their fault. Of course, their fault is that they have to restructure the economy, that this stops happening. Now, despite all this, the growth has been low. There are many reasons for that. Growth is not only low, it is declining. It is going down if you look at the trend. And of course, our Achilles heel of low savings and therefore low investments has been there. And savings, again, like growth, savings are not only low, they are also declining. They're not increasing, or they're not even staying steady. And workers' remittances help a bit, but primarily that goes towards consumption, and very little of it goes towards investment. The other big problem of low growth is very little private sector credit, and Shaukat Tareen is the best person to know about it. He's a banker of very high repute. There's obviously crowding out when the government has to go to the private sector, the banking sector, to fulfill their fiscal deficits. Obviously, the private sector is crowded out. There is another reason that few people realize that, you know, the DFIs, the development finance institutions of Pakistan, since the 80s, 90s, no longer exist. There were a number of them, they're all gone, which means there's no project financing. Project financing is fixed term, fixed interest rate financing, and which is a project developer needs that. So when the interest rates are low, everybody's very happy. They have to pay less. But when the rates are on their way up to very high levels, sometimes nobody can, in his or her right mind, would go into a new project. And in fact, there is a direct relationship between DFIs and growth. And one of the reasons that the growth is low is that there are no DFIs. And I would very much like that we focus towards creating some new DFIs or a national development bank. There exists since the 2000s an LTFF of the State Bank, which is a good scheme, but for exports. And the recent State Bank move of the turf financing, which has produced some excellent results. But we very definitely need a permanent kind of project financing setup. Third thing, low growth. The PSDP, various governments, I mean, they're whimsical about expenditure there. I mean, personal likes, dislikes, somebody likes motorways, somebody likes a lot of power generation. And it's also the first expenditure that is cut when the government is forced to meet some fiscal targets. So that seems to be our lowest priority, and the last but not the least, the labor productivity is low and has not improved. There's no product innovation. There is no value addition. We do not keep pace with technological advances. And one of the reasons that we have not talked much about, right now our exports are not even sensitive to devaluations. And the reason is that the exports have not moved with technology and haven't added value. And over a period of time, if they remain static, other competitors come and move that product out of the international market. We also have not seen prolonged periods of growth. Not only is the growth low, you see, in order to get out of poverty, we must have prolonged period of growth. That's how all the East Asian economies have grown, not in spurts. For example, the longest period of growth we saw was the 60s. And after that, even in the 80s, we never got more than 2 years of high growth, or the 2000s, not more than 2. And contrary to the claims of some political parties that they led growth at 5.5 or 5.8%, that only happened in their last year. If you look at the start of their tenures, the growth was low. Other very dangerous element that is happening is agriculture as a percentage of GDP is going down. Now, not always dangerous, provided it is accompanied by the manufacturing sector growing. But unfortunately, the manufacturing sector is also going down as a percentage of GDP, and we are relying on consumption, and the service sector is going up. The economy generally, we have seen only grows when it grows in periods of aid flows. And when the aid flows stop coming, we end up with another kind of aid, which is the multilateral financial institutions, the IMF and all that. And the reason is that during the aid flows and during the periods of moderately higher growth, relatively higher growth, that comes primarily from government expenditure and from consumption, and not from manufacturing and exports. We are never able to enhance productive capacity. We are never able to have capital formation or development of good infrastructure, or never been able to develop international class human resources. All I'll say now, and I personally feel that it is now a matter of national survival. We all talk about it, but if you want to break out of poverty, we need sustained periods of high growth, 6, 7, 8%. We need high quality HR, and we need to, the jobs are going to come from the private sector. The government share in creating new jobs is constantly decreasing. It's less than 20% now. The jobs are going to come from the private sector, and all we have to do, and I leave it to Shaukat to talk about what he has in mind, and I know he has a lot of excellent ideas. I've been working with him for a long time. We have to follow the East Asian model, the Japanese model, the Korean model, the Chinese model. They all first consolidated their manufacturing and their industries with incentives, with support, with policies. But that support was not perpetual. It had sunset clauses. It was linked to moving towards the next phase, the next value addition, and then eventually penetrating the international markets in a competitive manner. That's the kind of direction we need to move. We only should support efficient industries, and we should reduce the cost of doing business. We've heard a lot about that, but if your cost is higher than your competitors, particularly the cost of utilities, you will never be able to compete. And the government must get involved in high quality technical training and move with technological advances in the world, and produce the required infrastructure in Pakistan. Now, I've spoken too much, but I just thought I should tell the audience that what is the problem with our economy. And I know that there's nobody better equipped today than our new finance minister, Mr. Shaukat Tareen, to handle this. And with these remarks, I'd like to thank everybody once again, and ask the executive director to invite the finance minister.
Thank you, sir. That was a fine synopsis of the state of play of the economy and some ground truths about the challenges and the possibilities that lie before us, which is a good segue to our main topic of discussion today. Gives me special pleasure to welcome Minister for Finance and Revenue, Mr. Shaukat Tareen. In the brief period that he has been finance minister, Mr. Tareen has shared a clear vision of how he sees the possible evolution of Pakistan's economic landscape. He has called for sustained and inclusive growth of the economy, sending positive signals all around. The task, though, is fraught with challenges. But Mr. Tareen is no stranger to taking on difficult assignments. In 2008, he became finance minister, and he and his team soon brought stability to an economy that was hit hard by the global financial and economic crisis. His other major achievement then, and there were more, was conclusion of a consensus National Finance Commission Award. That this was done after 19 years of back and forth between the Federation and provinces shows the pitfalls inherent in this process and the care and knowledge that it needed to bring it to fruition. Earlier, Mr. Tareen led a turnaround of Pakistan's largest nationalized bank, Habib Bank Limited. Behind these achievements is a long and successful banking career within Pakistan and internationally. His achievements have earned wide recognition. Mr. Tareen is a recipient of the National Civil Award Sitare-e-Pakistan for contribution to public service, and the State Bank of Pakistan's Quaid-e-Azam Gold Medal. It is an extraordinary track record, but one that also raises expectation. It is my privilege to invite the Finance Minister to the virtual podium. Your mic, sir.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the introduction. I'll just go straight into where we are today. I think, well, everybody knows that by the end of last government's tenure, although we had a growth of between 5.5% to 5.8%, but we also had a current account deficit of almost $20 billion. We had an overvalued rupee. Actually, our exports had declined from $25 billion in 2013 to almost $21 billion in 2018. We had a high fiscal deficit, and the country was moving towards a default, as state bank reserves were barely enough to, meet 1 to 1.5 months of imports. And we had a ballooning circular debt. Those days, the payments for the capacity payments were around 465 billion rupees a year. I think Prime Minister, gave him credit. He tried his level best to get money from his friends and found out the hole was too big. So he had to go to the IMF. Unlike 2008, when I went to the IMF, when people were friendly to us, the countries were friendly to us because of war on terror, and we got a very useful package, which was almost 6 times our quota. This time around, IMF was very tough. I think they were not, obviously, given the geopolitical situation around us, the countries who influenced, the major Western powers. So this IMF program was tough and front-loaded. The interest rates, the discount rate was raised to 13.25% when the core inflation was 7%. Frankly, I have a problem because discount rates don't manage food inflation. Core inflation was 7% and overall inflation of a little over 10%, where the rest was food inflation. I think IMF mandating us to go to 13.25% was an overkill, which cost us hundreds of billions of rupees. They also made us do a steep devaluation of our rupee. There were sharp increases in electricity, gas, and other tariffs to bring down the circular debt flows. Well, this was for stabilization of the economy. Obviously, the growth rate, went down, and we're looking at around 1.5, 1.9% growth. But then COVID happened, and COVID pushed this growth to negative territory, 0.5%. The government just did well, introduced a fiscal stimulus, gave people, the needy people, some money, cash, and it was very efficiently done by the ESAS program. There was a liquidity stimulus by the State Bank of Pakistan for the business sector, whether large, small, and then Prime Minister, I think, did a great job by introducing the construction package, because he realized that construction is one industry which not only just brings in a lot of labor to work, but also supports around 42 industries on its own. And by giving them the incentives, you would at least pump up some kind of, economic activity. The economy started to stabilize. Current account deficits, actually was curtailed, and in the recent year, it is in a surplus. But economic growth was negative. It started recovering this year as the large-scale manufacturing started to pick up, Exports started to pick up. Agriculture, major crops were, very robust, except cotton. And services sector, started to pick up alongside housing. Not only this happened, but as the economy picked up, we have seen the revenues of the government also started to pick up. This month, they will cross 4 trillion rupees for the first time in the history of Pakistan, and probably will be closer to 4.2. We see a 3.94% growth in the economy. Well, people predicted start of this fiscal that probably be between 1.5 to 3%, but I think we are hitting around 3.94%. But this is where we are today. So you want to hear what are we going to do going forward? I think what we want is an inclusive and sustainable growth over a long period of time. As Humayun said, the East Asian economies such as Turkey, they achieved a certain level of economic, prosperity through inclusive and sustainable growth. So, as he said that, we have never had sustainable growth for a long period of time, except in the 60s. So when I just came in, I just got some eminent economists together. We had an EAC, Economic Advisory Council, but out of that Advisory Economic Council, we had a few eminent economists led by Dr. Ishrat Hussain, and I requested them to find out why don't we have an inclusive and sustainable growth over a long period of time? What causes us to break the cycle? So they are working on it. By the next week, we'll probably have a very comprehensive answer. But then we also tasked the Economic Advisory Council to work with the government in 12 sectors of the economy, and give us short-term, medium, and long-term plans how to grow these sectors. We do not have the resources to cover all the sectors, but we are focused now. And I'm talking about major sectors like fiscal side. We're talking about the agriculture, manufacturing, power sector, financial sector, housing, all those major sectors. We said, now you please give us some way forward. And this is the first time that we'll be doing this. Because after the 60s, when we used to have a very powerful planning commission, and it used to be the mother of the government, I think successive governments, made them just a project evaluation and implementation division. This time around, we are going to do this, and hopefully when it starts working, we're going to fold that whole process into the planning commission to make it once again a very powerful ministry. But then we will have a planned growth and a roadmap which we can, not only this government can follow, but subsequent governments can also follow. And this has been, the hallmark of countries who have grown, that they had consistency in the planning process, and whether it's India, China, and some of the other East Asian countries, and even in Turkey. So what is our focus now? I think our focus has now shifted to growth. Unless we do not grow the economy, I think with all these other things, we are not going to be able to move into the next orbit. So how do we grow the economy? The first task is obviously, like any other government, is to increase revenues. Our revenues at less than 10% of GDP, they're not good enough. So we have to figure out how to grow these revenues, and I'll obviously will tell you some of those things which we will be doing. But the fact is that we are going to add ₹1 trillion into our, revenue stream, next year. This year will be the highest, revenue collection, closer to, 4.8 trillion rupees, which is the first in history. But then next year we'll probably go to around 5.8 trillion. IMF is saying, closer to, 6 trillion. But whether it's 5.8 or 6, it's pretty close. But never have we collected ₹1 trillion additionally in a year. So that receives our number one, a kind of focus or efforts. Then PSDP, we are going to spend 650 billion this year, but then it will ramp it up to around 900 billion next year. But it will have to be efficient. And I think for the knowledge of the audience, the Planning Commission started, doing the public-private partnerships, in the PSDP, which means the amount of 900 billion will have a greater impact on the ground with the participation of the private sector. Then we move into the productive sectors. Productive sectors of our economy, which are number one to me, is agriculture. We all know that we used to be a food exporting country. Now we are a net food importing country. And this is a far cry from the 60s, 70s, and even 80s, 90s. So we got to focus on that. We have to focus on all the elements of our agriculture chain. And I think there is the plan, which is really a very, very progressive plan, which is being put in place. And in this budget too, you will see that we'll put in we'll give a lot of incentives to the agriculture, sector of our economy. We have to make our industry more efficient. When we make our industry more efficient, our exports become more efficient, and we export more. So am I asked, why is it that we keep falling this trap? The very fact is that when we start growing, obviously there is a pressure on, imports. People have the buying power, so they just try to buy other things which are then we can't manufacture. We don't manufacture, so we import. And that puts pressure on our, reserves, foreign currency reserves. Because our exports are not keeping pace with our overall growth, we fall short of dollars. Never have we gone into a tailspin for other reason than balance of payments. So exports, exports, exports. I think that is the mantra. And I will later on tell you what kind of measures we are taking, to just boost our exports. We are also going to just give incentives to our service industry, whether it's housing. We are also during this within the services sector, we have also make our e-commerce very efficient through digitization, and we will give incentives over there, so that we, rather than just being a cash economy, it becomes a digital economy, and that just creates opportunities for us even in the revenue collection. We have to stabilize the power sector. Power sector is a big hole. Today at 2.3 trillion, the circular debt is humongous. Not only we have to stop the flows, we got to reduce it over a period of time. And how do we do it? When there is a challenge of capacity payments, which are going to go up, rise up to 1.45 trillion rupees a year. Remember, I told you it was 465 billion in 2018. We're going to triple to 1.5 trillion, 4.5 trillion. Because I think when we started installing additional capacity, we forgot that it has to be used. Or otherwise, because of the contracts, we'll have to start paying for the electricity we are not even, producing and using. So this is a great challenge, because unless we make it financially viable, nobody's going to invest in this sector in the future. So this is a great challenge, and we are coming up with innovative ways to make sure that our circular debt does not increase and starts reducing, over a period of time. But the Prime Minister has given commitment to the people of Pakistan that, we are not going to increase the electricity tariff in the near future, because that doesn't help. People are already burdened with, a very costly electricity. Maybe the lower end is protected, but what about the middle class? What about the industrial sector, commercial sector, export sector? So power sector has to be stabilized. We need to control prices. And prices here, what we see is all food inflation. I've already mentioned to you about agriculture. Unless we do not increase the production of agriculture, this is not going to be, controlled in a kind of a long term. So we also have to give the market the mechanism to take away these large margins which people have, the middlemen have, from the farmer to the wholesaler. The margins are over 400–500%. So we need to create commodity warehousing, cold storages, mechanism for farmer to come to the wholesale market themselves, alongside, productivity in the agriculture sector, so that we start producing surpluses. Administrative control also will have to be strengthened. And during the Musharraf era, I think price magistrate, control magistrates were removed. We have to think through, whether we have to bring them back. But importantly, I think, this is going to be a change from the previous governments. That we are not only going to be dependent on the trickle-down effect to boost the incomes of the people. Because what has happened in the past is that with 3, 4, 5 year, growth cycles, the minute, the trickle down reaches in the bottom segments of our society, the cycle breaks. These guys, they take one step forward and then fall right back to where they were. So that is why we are saying a sustainable growth over a long period of time, so that that trickle-down effect reaches all sectors of the economy. But as I said, departure from the past, we are also going to be working on the bottoms-up approach. Even Joe Biden has said the US needs that. If US needs that, by God, we certainly need that. When I say bottoms-up approach, I'm saying the 4 to 6 million households at the bottom rung of our income levels will have to be given interventions whereby they can earn their living on their own and not just be dependent on handouts. They should have houses. They should have health insurance. They should have skill development for, their family members so that they can go and just, get some jobs. A comprehensive package. And we have to do it in a way whereby it's not inflationary. That it basically does not, we don't depend on fiscal deficits to fund this. So it has to be innovative. And we are working on that. So what do we have in the budget? I think in the budget, we have additionality of 1 trillion rupees in revenues. We are not going to increase taxes on people who are paying taxes, apart from remove some incentives from people we believe they've been given incentives for no rhyme or reason. We are going to take away the harassment, of the FBR from the lives of the people. A lot of people complain that we are not in the net because we are worried about the harassment of FBR. So in this budget, you will see the announcement that there will be universal self-assessment and third-party audit for 3 to 4% of the population, a risk-based population, but done by third party. No FBR person will do that. So people will be free of the harassment of the FBR. But if that is done, then it will be incumbent upon people who have incomes or the merchants who have, who basically control consumption to pay taxes. Because if we find out, and we'll have a cell which go all out using technology, which now gives us the ability to reach out to those people who have electricity bills, they have energy bills, they have deposits. So we have the data. We'll reach them, and if they are willful defaulters, if those people who are supposed to pay taxes are not paying taxes, so we'll basically take punitive actions and put them behind bars. We mean business. We believe that using technology will help us expand our retail, GST. We have around 80,000 POSs in the market. We are only using 10,000 who are linked to the FBR. But I just want to go beyond that. I want to go beyond the 80,000. I want to take these POSs to 500,000 POSs in 2 years. Now somebody will ask who the hell is going to pay for them. The traders are not going to pay. We will pay. FBR will pay. We are going to pay for the POSs, and then we'll come up with a scheme whereby we give prizes to people who actually pay the sales tax. They send us the invoices or receipts, and we'll give them prizes every month. Large prizes, very large pool of prizes. So the consumer is going to make sure they force the retailer to give the proper receipt, or they'll move away from that store. So it's not going to be coercion. We are going to incentivize the customer to do that. And this has happened not only what we are doing, this is not unique. This happened in Turkey, happened in Colombia. I saw, in Kenya, there have been numbers in almost all retail shops. So it's happening all over the world. So this will help us really increase our sales, where we have 17% sales, GST. The contribution is, less than 5%. We're also going to, incentivize the productive sectors, the industry, the exports, as I said, told you, agriculture. This time around, I just told the Ministry of Commerce, you tell us what's the envelope you need, and let us not tell you how to distribute that. You distribute to those industries, those exporters who will enhance the productivity in their sectors. So they are going to be the decision makers. It's a paradigm shift. And let me tell you, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, nobody wants to let go of it, the control. And FBR is no exception. But I have convinced them, and they're convinced now, they let the productive side of our economy tell us what they need, and then we'll track it. It's not that, we just basically is free money, but we'll track it, but they have to decide. And this is, as I said, is a paradigm shift in thinking. We're going to incentivize exports through SCZs. As a matter of fact, we just decided that 1.5% in turnover tax is not going to be applicable in special economic zones. We are going to incentivize exports in the value-added sector. And we are going to incentivize IT. IT is $2 billion exports this year. I want to see that $8 billion in 2023. And by the way, in India, they broke the $1 billion exports in 2000. By 2010, they had crossed $100 billion. We had the same, a kind of caliber of people, if not better. So I think IT is where we must invest. And then we need to bring in FDI. This is very important. We need to bring in FDI in the export sector. Well, fortunately, unfortunately, and I'm not blaming the private sector in this, somehow the other, we have been saying export or import substitution is the same thing. I don't think so. When you basically say import substitution, yes, you replace, the dollars you would have spent on imports. Exports gives you much more than that. Export gives you, see, the ability to, if you have FDI over there, the technology, the money which comes in, the foreign currency for investments, but export markets. And that's how these East Asian countries, including China, have progressed. You all realize what Deng Xiaoping did in 1979. He actually created 4 zones and told them that these are your zones. You will have your own, legal system, financial system, labor system, and ability to train people. And we'll give you the territory, and then you just bring in money, manufacture, and re-export. Malaysia did the same thing. India has done, more or less the same thing. Turkey has done it, and so we should do the same thing. We must now encourage FDI in exports. We also need to, because exports have been a family business. So what has happened is the father is the chairman, the eldest son is the managing director, and then finance director and a sales director. So when father dies, within 2 generations, the family splits, and so does the business. All our industries today are fragmented, whether it's textile, whether it is leather, sports goods, I think, just there are exceptions, large groups over there. Otherwise, it's fragmented. So they cannot compete with the rest of the world. So they become a commodity business, and they basically compete on price. So we got to consolidate this. Unfortunately, we did not have a Chapter 11. Now we have that in shape of CRA, Corporate Restructuring Act. So we use that, we create the enabling environment and consolidate our industry. So there is scale. So there is value addition. And we bring in foreign investors to buy those entities and invest. We got to develop the most important, asset we have, human resource. I think Humayun mentioned that. I mean, our, education level at 60% is not good enough. Our health, we don't spend any money over there. I think Prime Minister Imran Khan wants to quadruple, the investments in these two categories. Obviously, these are the provincial subjects, but we'll work with the provinces to make sure that we basically spend quality money on education and health. There is another area which people forget, but is a great enabler. I think Humayun has already mentioned that, and that's the financial sector. I think banking footprint, is only 33-34% of the GDP. Compare that to 50-55% Bangladesh, 80-90% in India, 180% in Korea, and 225% in China. So if our entire formal economy, which has no access to capital markets, depends on the banking sector, and the banking sector only supports them, 16 to 17%, because the advances to deposit ratio is only 50%. Then how the hell are we going to grow? So we have to work on that. We have to increase the banking footprint in this country. We have to, remove the regional disparity in the resource allocations. Money is collected all over the country, spent in only 85% of that is spent in 9 cities. KPK has over 600 billions of deposits. The money lent in KPK is less than 50 billion rupees. Similarly, Balochistan, North Sindh, South Punjab, Azad Kashmir. So this disparity has to be removed. The sectoral, 75% is corporate, lending. The rest is 5-6% here and there, whether it's SME, consumer, agriculture. So I think this has to be removed. Then create capacity, as Humayun said, to fund projects and infrastructure. When PICIC, IDBP, etc. were rolled, into different banks and said that, well, we have large banks and they're going to lend projects and for projects and infrastructure, that hasn't happened. Because they've gone to the private sector, and the private sector, finds very, very easy to make money by putting money into the government paper. So we got to now set up, some, DFIs and infrastructure development, banks. We have to bring in FDI. Board of Investment has to do a better job. We have to now leverage CPAC. China is outsourcing 85 million jobs in the sunset industry, but for us, that's not sunset, textile, leather, and including, we should ask them to bring in, investment in IT. We would like to bring in technology in all facets of our economic life. So make the economy more efficient. I think I'll just stop right here. So at the end, what am I saying? There will be emphasis on growth. And we would like to have it all inclusive and sustainable growth. I don't want to see this economy, just going through the 10% in 2 years. It will not. And it should not. We should grow the economy in a manner whereby it sustains itself over a long period of time and it's inclusive. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm here to take your calls, questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Finance Minister. That was a very insightful and a very complete discussion. And as I said in my introduction, your comments in the press so far have sent very positive signals. And in my view, you've only reinforced those positive signals today. Thank you. I'll just raise a couple of things before we go to questions. You did talk about the ESC and having 12 sectors with specialist economists if you look at East Asia, all of the growth has been led by the chief executive of the country, and it makes a reading of a who's who of the leading political leaders of the last 50 years: Lee Kuan Yew, Deng Xiaoping, Mahathir Mohamad, and this has to be integrated because there's strong political economy issues in Pakistan as well. And you very rightly pointed to the IPPs, the power sector, but that's just the highlight. There are other things, and I don't want to, of course, contest what you're saying. Just moving this discussion a little bit further, I also feel that the PSDP, and that's why the Planning Commission's chairman, when it was envisaged in the beginning, is the Prime Minister of Pakistan. I also feel that the PSDP should have and that's a personal opinion, anyone can disagree with that, just have one goal, which is export growth by building the right infrastructure and by investing in human capital. And you've alluded to that. The IT industry will only grow if we have the human capital and import substitution. I know that you disagree with it, but the East Asian model was to import, to start making parts and then take over that product and start exporting. Thank you very much. So that was extremely enlightening. We move to questions. I will open this to questions, and those who have not yet may please raise their hands, because I'm receiving a lot of text messages and I will not be able to keep up with all of those. But my request is, I just wanted to add a couple of things. We have one of the highest listening audience today, sir, about 160 that I saw at one point. And it's been telecast at least partly on our Facebook page, and it was, of course, like your talk was on PTV Live, also tickers on all other channels. I will request questioners to be very brief, very precise with their questions, because there's just way too many questioners. And I may not be able to take everyone. So perhaps we begin with Tariq Ikram Saab, who was previously Chairman TDAP. And then I'll go to Madame Charmaine Hidayatullah. Tariq Ikram Saab.
Thank you, Ashraf, and thank you, Shaukat. I can just say that what you have said is like music to my ears, absolute music to my ears, fundamentally because it's a paradigm shift. You are moving from incrementalism to a demand-led or a objective-led approach through sustainability. Very briefly, I just like to emphasize two things. One is that we all know that revenue and export is the fundamental need of the country. In terms of exports, as I think I've mentioned to you in my personal conversation, I have worked out in detail that there is a potential of $100 billion. And I can tell you that the sectors are machinery mechanical, which is 11 billion, machinery electrical, which is 8 billion, pharmaceuticals, which is 5 billion, and so on and so forth. Now, why do I say this? Because in my humble experience, the thing that is lacking in our export is a clarity of which sectors are going to give us the bang for the buck. Where do we get, I don't care whether it is textiles or whether it's spices or whatever, I need dollars. So which sector is going to give us the dollars? So my humble request is a clarity on which sectors which we will focus on. And as you very rightly said, we cannot do everything. I've seen the Ministry of Commerce's view. There are a few sectors that are missing, but sectoral and geographic focus is critical. Secondly, you focused on very rightly on FDI. And if FDI is right, we can get a right amount of technology. So the second thing that I wanted to point out was that I looked at the IMF's country report of April 2021. I was a bit disappointed, I must say, because it contains a medium-term debt strategy of Pakistan. It outlines 6 elements, things like lengthening maturity profile of debt, boosting transparency, etc., but does not include exports at all. So a medium-term debt strategy of Pakistan does not mention export. I rest my question and comment here, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tariq Bhai. That is very good. I will ask, and please bear with me. Please, all questioners, be brief. I have to get in as many as possible, and this is a very busy time for the finance minister. So we can't. On exports, I'll just add, sir, that currently just 2% of GDP is being invested in manufacturing, which has come down from 4 or 5% 15 or 20 years ago. After Charmaine Hidayatullah, we'll go to Irfan Wahab, CEO of Telenor. But
okay, thank you, Honorable Minister Shaukat Tareen Saab, and all the honorable participants. Salam alaikum. I would like to say that after hearing the speech of Mr. Shaukat Tareen, I have a spark of hope. We had lost all hope in the economy, but now I feel we have a wizard, an economic wizard. The other thing I would like to say is, since the fiscal deficit of Pakistan was 4.44, if I'm right, or more than that, why are we keeping on the public banks? They were put up for privatization, but the government is paying so much in salaries and pensions. It is my humble request that the banks that have become white elephants should be privatized, and maybe they will contribute to the economy. Thank you.
Ji, thank you, Ji. Thank you, Honorable Finance Minister. It's heartening to see your focus on sustainable growth and FDI. And now here representing the technology sector, telecoms and IT, it's also a fact that the FDI in telecoms, which used to be one of the major contributors historically, has gone down last few years. And there are many reasons for that. While we have really engaged with the government last couple of years to fix some of these issues, we're more than happy to actually come with the medium-term solution that how we can bring more investment and also boost various sectors, because telecom is no more just one sector: education, health, e-commerce, agriculture. A lot depends on technology, as you rightly said. But just a comment short term, as we are approaching budget, after a due process, there were certain approvals or endorsements which ECC and Cabinet has done to incentivize this sector. So I truly hope that we see those in the finance bill, upcoming finance bill, and that will boost the confidence of international investors. And we see longer term opportunities. And what was missing is some sort of a partnership, a strategic plan which goes over multiple years to make it happen. And it's really encouraging to hear your comments and your focus on that. And we will get back to you with our concrete proposals on that.
Thank you, Irfan Saab. We'll go to Ismail Qureshi and Wajid Jawad.
Thank you, Shawayat sir. Thank you very much. Welcome, Shaukat Tareen, and congratulations for coming again as a finance minister. We have a lot of hopes with you after listening to you. I'm very happy that you talked about exports and exports as a mantra. So I would like to, because my life has been spent in exports, to talk about a few things relating to exports. Like Tariq Ikram Sahab has said, very useful, made very useful suggestions. Now, as Humayun said, that we should have some development banks like PICIC, IDBP. Similarly, there has been in air establishment of an Exim Bank, which has not yet materialized. Similarly, Export Credit Guarantee Bank would have, helped a lot of exporters increase their exports and take risks also. We did establish one with very mere capital, small capital, and not really professionally managed. And I remember when I was at the helm, the people from Islamic Development Bank contacted us that if the paid-up capital could be increased to say 100 crores, they were ready to come in and take equity. Similarly, we also launched a scheme of public-private participation like EPB or TDAP plus IPIDC and private sectors in the sectors where the investors were reluctant. Similarly, there is a textile city, 1,200 acres were allotted during Humayun's commerce ministership. That is still not materialized. That is in Port Qasim area. And 300 acres for garment city are still lying as they are, and nothing has moved on that. So export mantra is great. I would also give you my idea that if you make an investment of $500 million in industry for exports, you will get sustained export additionality of $1 billion for next 7 to 10 years. So if you set up a target of say $10 billion, you come up with $5 billion investment. Without investment, I don't think you will be able to make much success. Thank you very much.
Ismail Qureshi, and then Ministry of IT.
Thank you. Dr. Tareen Saab, thank you very much. Knowing you as we do, this is a presentation was indeed very forthright. There's so much clarity, and more importantly, there's a very clear goal that you want to achieve. I know this is a long-term but ambitious goal, but this is very important for Pakistan. I think there are many talents that we have discussed about you, but we have another unique talent, apart from many others, which is reaching out to the people or other stakeholders. In this case, I'm talking of another special stakeholder, which are the bunch of politicians. What are your thoughts, sir, to stop this political Tom and Jerry, which is going on, which is so important? Otherwise, the sustainable growth may not be possible. And how do we then ensure, and I want to have your thoughts, that this is a continuity of policy by the succeeding governments to achieve this long-term goal? Thank you.
Thank you, Ismail. Before we go to the Pakistan Ministry of IT, there's a gentleman, Khalid Khokar Saab, he represents agriculture. उनका हाथ raised नहीं है, मगर वो बार-बार मुझे कह चुके हैं too. So after IT, we will go to Mr. Khalid Khokar, and then I will ask Finance Minister if we can continue with more.
Thank you, sir. So you have mentioned IT exports will be crossing $2 billion mark this year. And with 40% growth, this sector is surpassing any other traditional export sector. IT sector is one of the most affected sector for FBR harassment, as you mentioned this problem for other sectors. So through Ministry of IT's platform, we have sensitized every forum of the government, including State Bank, FBR, and provincial revenue authorities, that IT sector is a non-traditional sector and should be dealt in a non-traditional way. Please share your thoughts how Ministry of Finance can endorse facilitation for the sector, and if Ministry of Finance will have a detailed session with Ministry of IT to have a look on sector's export strategy. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Finance Minister.
Thank you, sir. Actually, that's a ministerial matter more than. Yes, Khalid Khokar sir, go ahead.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम जी सर, सबसे पहले तो मैं शुक्रिया अदा करता हूँ फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर साहब का कि जिन्होंने आज ये महसूस करवाया कि उनके दिल के साथ ज़राअत है। और हमारे जो इस वक्त आम काश्तकार के जो इशू है, वो हमारा सबसे बड़ा इशू है रिसर्च। हमारा जो रिसर्च का बजट है वो एग्रीकल्चर के जीडीपी का 0.18 है, इंडिया 0.4 है, चाइना 0.5 है, ब्राजील 1.75 है। यानी कि रिसर्च पिछली कई दहाइयों से हुकूमती तरजीहात पे नहीं है, जिसलिए हम कॉटन में पैदावार हमारी बहुत कम है। अभी फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर साहब ने फरमाया था उनकी टॉप प्रायोरिटी पैदावार बढ़ाना, तो उसके लिए सबसे ज्यादा जरूरी है कि हमारी कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन को कम किया जाए। हमारे पास लेवल प्लेइंग फील्ड नहीं है इस वक्त दुनिया के साथ। کیونکہ اگر انڈیا میں لے لیں وہاں پہ جو یوریا ہے وہ پاکستان روپیز میں 540 کا ہے، ہمیں 1800 کو مل رہا ہے. وہاں ڈی اے پی 12 پاکستان روپیز میں کوئی 2200 روپے کی، ہمیں وہ 5600 روپے کی مل رہی ہے. میری فنانس منسٹر صاحب سے گزارش ہے، اور خصوصاً بجلی کے اوپر، بجلی کا ہم بل ادا نہیں کر سکتے جتنی اس کی کاسٹ اس وقت بڑھ چکی ہے ان 2-3 سالوں میں، کیونکہ 2018 میں اس کا ریٹ تھا 5 روپے 35 پیسے پر یونٹ، اب وہ کوئی 12-13-14 روپے یونٹ تک چلی گئی ہے. اگر ہماری کاسٹ آف پروڈکشن کو یہ کم کر دیں، ہم اپنی پیداوار بڑھائیں گے اور انشاءاللہ آپ کا امپورٹ بل کم ہوگا اور یہاں سے ایکسپورٹ ہوگی. اور مجھے بہت خوشی ہو رہی ہے، میں اپنے جذبات کا لفظوں میں احاطہ کر کے نہیں بتا سکتا کہ فنانس منسٹر صاحب نے بار بار ایگریکلچر کا ذکر کیا ہے. میں امید کرتا ہوں کہ اب ایگریکلچر یہاں پہ پروموٹ ہوگی اور اس بجٹ میں ٹاپ پرائرٹی ایگریکلچر ہوگی اور اس بجٹ کو ایگریکلچر بجٹ قرار دیا جائے گا. بہت شکریہ جی.
تھینک یو کوکر صاحب. فائنانس منسٹر صاحب اجازت ہے تو کچھ اور سوالات لے لیں.
جی اشرف بھائی، میرے خیال میں کہ آپ اس وقت جو 1:15 بجائے میری 2 بجے میٹنگ ہے ایک اور، تو میرے خیال میں کوئی 10-15 منٹ کے اور سوال لے لیں آپ.
رائٹ سرلی سر، رائٹ سر. میں نام لے لیتا ہوں. یہ وسیم وورا از فرام لاہور چیمبر آف کامرس. وسیم وورا. Mr. M. Arif. Arif sir, I'm not sure of his background, but he's raised his hand for a very long time. Allah Nawaz Samo. So we'll go there.
Assalamu alaikum. Finance Minister Sahab, it's really a pleasure to know that your emphasis on infrastructure projects, investments, and these infrastructure projects are necessary for exports. Pakistan needs projects which can promote exports in a modern way and in new items. I have set up a project for re-export in Port Qasim. Port Qasim has sent me finance charges of 19.5% as a markup. Is this the new interest rate in Pakistan? The markup is now raised to 19.5%. This is my question.
Thank you.
And whether we have to pay 19.5% as markup.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We'll go to جو میں نے نام دیے اس کے بعد اقدس افضل صاحب، اور پہلے جو میں نے نام دیے تھے اللہ نواز سامو اور ایم عارف.
جی میرا نام عارف ہے جناب. میں دو میرے سوالات ہیں ترین صاحب. ایک تو ہمارا بہت بڑا بجٹ کا حصہ پینشنز میں چلا جاتا ہے، سرکاری اور فوجی. اس کے لیے ہم کیا کرنا چاہ رہے ہیں؟ اس کے لیے یہ پینشن کا جو جن ہے ہمارا، وہ کیسے اس کو ہم کم کر سکتے ہیں، جو کہ بجٹ کا بہت بڑا حصہ کھا جاتا ہے. دوسرا جو ہمارا پی ایس ڈی پی پہ جو خرچہ ہوتا ہے، یہ پی ایس ڈی پی پہ خرچہ تو ہم کرتے ہیں کہ بھائی ہم ڈیولپمنٹ کے لیے، لیکن آپ کو پتہ ہے کہ اس ڈیولپمنٹ بجٹ میں سے کتنا ادھر ادھر ہو جاتا ہے، کتنا فلٹر ہو جاتا ہے. تیسرا یہ کہ ہم نے اپنی پیسے قیمت، روپے کی قیمت ہم نے پہلے مصنوعی طور پر بڑھا کے رکھی تھی، جو کہ کہا جاتا ہے، جیسا آپ نے بھی کہا، ہم نے اس کو ڈی ویلیو کیا. اس سے فرق کیا پڑا ہمیں؟ کیا ہماری ایکسپورٹ بڑھ گئی؟ ہماری ایکسپورٹ تو وہیں کی وہیں کھڑی ہیں، چاہے روپیہ اوپر ہو چاہے روپیہ نیچے ہو. ہم سے زیادہ روپے کی ویلیو تو انڈیا اور بنگلہ دیش کی ہے، اور وہ ہم سے زیادہ ایکسپورٹ کر رہے ہیں. تو آخر ہمارے روپے کی قدر و قیمت میں کمی یا اضافہ سے ایکسپورٹ پہ تو کوئی اثر نہیں پڑتا. تو ہم کہاں چوک ہو، ہماری یہ بھول چوک کہاں ہے؟ یہ اس کے اوپر آپ ذرا روشنی ڈالیے.
سامو صاحب، اللہ نواز سامو صاحب.
This is very inspiring speech from Honorable Minister. میرا صرف ایک چھوٹا سا کوشچن ہے کہ باٹم اپ اپروچ کا جو پیکیج ہے that's very promising and inspiring. اچھا، اس کے لیے ہمارے پاس ایک سوشل کیپیٹل پہلے سے موجود ہے ڈیمانڈ سائڈ پہ، اور یہ سجیشن بھی ہے اور آنریبل منسٹر صاحب سے کہ سپلائی سائڈ پہ it is not only the provision of the capital which matters, पर इसको एक्सपेडाइट करने के लिए सम पॉलिसी इनेबलिंग इन्वायरमेंट भी चाहिए, जिसमें पॉलिसी इंसेंटिव हो, ताकि डिमांड साइड पे जो खास करके स्मॉल एंटरप्राइजेज हैं गांव की सतह पे, उनमें इंटरप्राइजेस को डेवलप करने के लिए मोबिलाइजेशन ऑफ फंड्स भी हो और एक किस्म की एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेशन भी हो. थैंक यू वेरी मच सर.
Thank you. We go to Afzal Saira Faisal Sayyed. Nabil, जरा आप note कर लें. Saira Faisal Sayyed, Dr. Rizvi, and Tariq Parvez. And might just submit that we'll have to end there because 1:30 deadline will appear. So go ahead, Afzal Saab, and then Saira Faisal Sayyed.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Saira Faisal Sayyed. I am the for GSMA. It is quite encouraging to hear such forward-looking enabling environment that His Excellency wants to create. And I would on a very short remark would endorse Mr. Irfan Wahab's comments as well. In a commendable step to stimulate the growth of digital Pakistan, the cabinet has recently moved forward in approving significant mobile services tax reforms. And we would, as GSMA, really request the implementation of the approved reforms in the upcoming financial bill with the objective to accelerate the transition of Pakistan to a digital economy and support the digital Pakistan vision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Saira Didi. That's very good. Afzal Saab, Dr. Rizvi, Tariq Parvez.
Am I audible, please?
Yes.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, Honorable Finance Minister. Your remarks were very, very encouraging. मेरा आज ही डॉन में एक आर्टिकल आया है, उसका मैंने नाम रखा है the Islamabad Consensus. And I think we need to move from the Washington Consensus to the Islamabad Consensus, which basically is what you have been talking about. So a new economic growth strategy based on Pakistan's priorities, economic growth, job creation, and poverty alleviation. आपकी तमाम remarks में एक चीज़ मुझे लगा कि somewhat missing, और वो थी कि how are we going to tackle poverty alleviation in this country? If I am to quote a study done by Dr. Hafiz Pasha and Shahid Kardar, वो कहती है कि worst case scenario में 15 से 20 million people are going to be pushed below the poverty line. तो मेरे पास उसके लिए एक solution है, solution तो नहीं कहूँगा, एक proposal that I've done some calculations कि अगर आप एहसास प्रोग्राम को 250 billion rupees से enhance करें, तो fiscal multiplier के through you can add an additional 180 billion on top of that 250 billion in 2 years. तो हमें इस किस्म की कोई strategies बनाने की ज़रूरत है जिसमें we focus on growth, jobs creation and poverty alleviation, because poverty alleviation जो है वो should also be a part of the economic policy. And I congratulate you for your focus in some of the very important things that this country requires. आपने सही मायनों में paradigm shift आप लेकर के आए हैं. I'm very encouraged and very excited that you have taken the helm, and I'm ready and willing to serve you in any capacity. I am the head of Department of Economics at Habib University in Karachi, but I'm willing to travel wherever my services are required. Thank you very much, and congratulations once again.
All right, thank you, Saab. You mentioned Hafiz Pasha Saab. Until a few minutes ago, he was listening in. Maybe he's still there. Dr. Rizvi, Tariq Parvez, and Ambassador Ashraf Jahangir Qazi, and we will end there.
Thank you, Ashraf. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Ashraf. It was great to hear Mr. Humayun. I think I've got my other phone. Let me
go ahead.
Okay. It was great to have Mr. Humayun to so aptly put the whole things into one, envelope, the problems of Pakistan. But now I'd like to follow up on the question on pension, which one of our friends has already put it. My question is to the Honorable Finance Minister: how did he manage such a large, ever-increasing financial commitment? Is he thinking more focused question, is he thinking to invest the pension fund in a risk-averse investment like AAA bond to get us out of this mess? Not mess, I will say the commitment, ever-increasing commitment. That's my question.
Thank you, Rizvi. We'll go to Tariq Pervez and then Ashraf J. Qazi sir.
Thank you very much, Ashraf. My question is about the impact of organized crime on our economy. Some economists have called organized crime the underbelly of economy. The world over, there is a growing realization about the importance of organized crime, and many countries have adopted a holistic approach to deal with this issue and formulated national strategies to deal with organized crime. For example, United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, European Union, etc. My question is that, can you hear me?
Yes. We can hear you.
My question is, how serious is the impact of organized crime on the economy of Pakistan in your view, and how do you intend dealing with it in the next financial year? And a supplementary question is that, as you very rightly pointed out, that the focus of our economic planning is going to be exports, exports, and exports. And I believe that organized crime is one area which impacts on the exports very heavily. I would like to have your views on this, whether you are in favor of having a national strategy to deal with organized crime like other countries, or you think it's not much of a threat. Thank you.
Thank you. Not sure. Do you mean FATF kind of things, or are you referring to something else? Okay. Ashraf J. Qazi sir.
Assalamu alaikum. I would first like to congratulate the finance minister for his brilliant exposition of the challenges that face us, and the comprehensive nature of his talk reminded me of when I was a young and very impressionable person, of the experience I had when Ghulam Ishaq, the late president of Pakistan, used to sort of give his analyses of Pakistan's economy, which I thought were incomparably great. We've also had great economists before, like Mahbub ul Haq and so many current luminaries. My experience has been that our economists are second to none. But when it comes to implementing a comprehensive program to get out of a low growth situation and get rid of our sort of debt encumbrances, we really do have to tackle the political and economic system at its root. Otherwise, the recommendations of experts get lost in the political maelstrom. And of course, the unwillingness of a number of people to undergo the rigors of such transformation. So is it enough to have an expert analysis without or not being part of a political and economic transformation program? You may believe that what you have suggested is adds up to an economic transformation program, and I will not disagree with you. Its implementation might be hindered right from the very start by the political and economic system which has prevailed here for the past 70 years. And so how do we begin to tackle that? Or is that something that experts cannot address?
Thank you, sir. We are getting to 1:30, so we now go to the finance minister for his concluding comments. Mr. Finance Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashraf Bhai. I think thank you everybody else for appreciating at least our efforts over here. So I would like to tackle the last question first. I have a lot of respect for Ashraf Jahangir Qazi Saab. I think he has just raised a very pertinent question. We can make plans, but they could be just disrupted by the political, forces. So this time around, when I said that I have attempted to make short, medium, long-term plans, we have involved the political apparatus, in it, which means not only the experts, but also the politicians, the people who are managing the government, who are the politicians, are also involved. So it is their commitment. More importantly, it is the commitment of the Prime Minister to me that we will do what is necessary for the good of this country. I mean, you should remember, I didn't have any reason to join this government. I could just chill, I was a finance minister before. So I've just come here just because I have a passion to make sure that the society over here transforms into an economic, welfare state. And that means that, all levels of our society prosper. And it's a passion. My father was a very active Pakistan movement, worker who died when he was the chairman of Pakistan Workers' Trust. He was a passionate Pakistani, and I'm a passionate Pakistani. So I will just do whatever I can with the remainder of my life to make sure that this thing I will take to fruition. And if I feel somewhere in the middle that there is disruption, then frankly, that'll be the end. But I don't think, the Prime Minister Imran wants that. And I think I can assure you, Qazi Saab, that we have the will now to just carry it through. Now, going back to Tariq Ikram Saab, absolutely, I believe that there is a lot of potential for new things. So let me tell you what we are doing this time around. I am giving incentives to already existing export industries like textile, but also only in value addition, so that we can move from commodity, exports to value-added exports. But I am just giving Razak Daud Saab X amount of money to try to just explore new areas. In this budget, probably like, motorcycles, three-wheelers, motor parts, exports, so that we start testing new areas, start expanding the base. And I think you're absolutely right. We got to be very clear, have clarity in the sectors. So we just can't we can't have a shotgun approach, a rifle shot, but we will be giving incentives for new areas. Every year we'll add 2, 3, and 4. Now, when you talk about IMF, only concerned about debt management and no mention of exports, Tariq Saab, IMF is an international bureaucracy. They have a cookie cutter approach. It is for us to just basically tailor make their programs and say, this is what is good for us and this is what is not. So don't you worry about it. I've known these guys. Irfan Wahab Sahib talked about focus on technology. There will be incentives in this budget. I believe that there are areas where we basically have to pull up all stops. IT is one of them. I've seen this thing take off in India and other parts of the world. I believe we have equal potential. India went from 1 billion to 100 billion in 10 years. We could probably go from, the 2 billion we have today into 50, 60 billion in 10 years. And that will be a paradigm shift. So we will give all the incentives to IT. Why do we have these public sector banks? There is only one public sector bank, which is National Bank. National Bank has now become pretty efficient, has made a lot of money this year. You need to have one public sector bank in a developing economy because it basically, helps the government at times. and the rest, and it's also making good return. I think their return is probably 1.5% on asset, which is better than most of the other banks or quite a few other banks. So there's no other public sector bank, in the public with the government. Baji Saab has talked about Development Bank, Exim Bank. All this is happening. Exim Bank, is there. It's not working. The guarantee scheme is not working. Textile City, we have to take a view of that and see why it is not working. This was discussed only just last week with the Prime Minister in the chair. And as you said, putting money, generates additional exports. Believe you me, you are talking to already converted. So we will put money in the exports, and that is what we will make sure that we will have a sustainable growth over a period of time. I think Ismail Qureshi sir talked about, politics. You know that I just in an interview, I said that I would like to have a charter of economy. Talk to these guys in People's Party and P.M. Noon, and I know all of them. So I will be meeting the Prime Minister shortly, and I'll take his permission to reach out to these guys and, just away from the political humbug and work out, on 5-6 areas what we should be doing long term. Because when Manmohan Singh, forget about, China, it's one political system which carries on. But India is a democracy. So Manmohan Singh came up with a roadmap. The successive, Congress and BJP governments have followed the general, path towards economic growth. So I think we should have the same thing. Then talk about IT exports. As I say, I'm converted. Harassment of FBR is going to be removed from the IT sector. I know there were a few areas and they were being harassed, and we will remove all those things, and we'll look at this as a non-traditional sector. As a matter, I was just thinking, because when you said that, I'm going to have this meeting with my FBR people this afternoon, that whatever I think harassment and things which basically IT sector has come up with, we will actually remove them. Well, if it works, it will work. If it doesn't work, we have another year coming. So I think we can always just use that. But I think it will work. Remove the harassment, and then I think they will just, our entrepreneur is very, very productive. Khalid Saab talked about, the research in agriculture. Khalid Saab, I can assure you, I told Makhdum Fakhr Saab that agriculture is a provincial subject, but I would like to put money from the federal government in the research. Let's upgrade whatever we have in the research centers we have, but bring in, world-class research centers, new research centers in 5-6 major crops, and I will pay for it. I believe in research. The very fact is we have not moved in, the productivity in major crops is because I think we have not worked on, kind of our seeds. So clearly it's one of my, kind of priority. And of course, we'll just try to do everything to lower the cost of production. I think Wasim Saab talked about infrastructure project for exports. I think, and asked me, is 19.5, the right kind of market? Absolutely not. That is why we are going to come up with infrastructure banks and development banks. These commercial banks are treating everything, whether it's development or it's commercial, at the same level. And they're really become greedy. So they're private sector banks, but we will bring in a couple of banks, which is, we used to have IDBP, we used to have PECEC, NDFC, etc. So we'll bring a development bank and an infrastructure development bank. Asif sir talked about pensions. Pensions is a major issue. But, we are going to move away. We're going to look at, and learn from other countries, even, private sector, how they tackle the pensions. So pensions, the way we are doing, it's very archaic. And we even, people don't get the kind of right kind of returns. So we are working on a progressive, kind of way of dealing with this. There is a Pay and Pension Commission, and Nargis Sethi is heading that. And I've told her that, listen, you include private sector people. She has a couple of people. I said, no, there should be more and more, but bring in people who internationally have managed this issue. You remember that in the US and other places, pensions was a great issue, and it actually bankrupted many companies. So it could bankrupt this country also. So we will look at it. This is one of the major issues for as far as we are concerned in pay and pension. How focused is the PSDP? I believe that it will become more and more focused when we keep shifting it to the public-private partnerships. Because when it is being done by the public sector, you obviously have delays in projects, and you basically, because of funding or all other reasons. And when you include the private sector for their own efficiency, for all profits, they make sure it is done timely basis and more efficiently basis. And I'll give you an example. Citibank constructed 2 buildings in Hong Kong. There was a 180-floor building, the other one 65 floor. And the time period was around 2 years. That they construct those in 2 years. Guess what? Because there were early completion bonuses, they were completed, everybody moved into those buildings in 20 months. 4 months before, the construction was supposed to. Why? There's an incentive. So I've just told the planning commission, please let's introduce these incentives. And they said, well, oh, by the way, I said, no, there's no such thing as by the way. I think go and give these incentives, those contractors who are going to build this, give them the incentives to complete it earlier than mandated. So we are going to make sure that these things are focused and we get a bang on the buck because okay, I'll give you another example. Every $1 rupee of PSDP which we plan, I think Ashraf Sabi बैठे हुए हैं, okay, we actually go and end up 2 rupees or 2 rupees 50 paise when it's completed. Why? Because of inefficiencies, delays, So अगर हमने 1 रुपए की चीज को 80 पैसे में 90 पैसे में complete करना है, so we might as well just follow what other countries have done. Devaluation, has it helped? Let me tell you, we have a very narrow export base. And I have told you before that we are competing on price. We are a commodity business when it comes to exports. So if you devalue, what the importer does is comes to you and says, oh, you basically have now gained 50 rupees on a dollar. Now give me 40. Otherwise, I'm not going to buy your product. And because yours is not a value added, most of it, you have no option but to just give him that 40 rupees. So that is why I'm saying that we got to move up the value chain so that and consolidate so that we have the scale that we do not sell our products on price alone. When that starts happening, then devaluation will also start helping us more. But having said that, by not devaluing, not keeping the rupee at the right price, we hurt ourselves, and we have seen in the previous 5 years, 25 billion exports in 13, 21 in 18. Bangladesh, 27 billion exports in 13, 37 billion in 18. They just moved the rupee, their currency in the right direction. So my own sense, and because they also had value addition. So I believe that not just keeping the rupee aligned with what you got real effective exchange rate hurts. You talked about, Samma Sahab talked about small loans. Sir, what we are going to introduce in the next few days, a couple of weeks, we are in the process of approvals, that first time in this country, the small SME, in the SME small S, which means, people who want, maybe 10, 15 lakhs, 20 lakh rupees of loans. It will be clean credit, no collateral, no collateral. And the government is going to fund the difference between what the banks are going to be given, which is 1% for the funding and 9% with the charge. But we will give a guarantee for the credit. Today, our total SME loans are 180,000. Can you imagine? 180,000. We want to take it to 1 million, 1.5 million in the next couple of years. That is the kind of paradigm shift we're talking about. Then we talk about digital Pakistan. Yes, Saira Bibi, I think we are bringing in all the incentives in this budget. We will do that. I think Afzal Saab talked about Pakistan versus Washington. I'm a passionate Pakistani. I've worked for the American Bank for 22 years, but I've just been here, and my father has worked for Pakistan. We believe in Pakistan. I believe that we must stand on our own feet, not on the crutches of Washington or whoever else. And I believe I feel ashamed when I just go and I get mistreated by whoever because we are Pakistanis. I just am reminded, Qazi Saab would just know, and others my age or maybe older know. In '68, we were the 4th largest economy in Asia. We had a higher, GDP than Korea, Saudi Arabia, Thailand. And look where we are now. So I want to make sure that I don't think, I have the lifespan to see that we just exceed Korea or whatever. But we will put this country back on track, on the rails, the way what we did in Habib Bank, which was totally bankrupt. And what I did was I just changed the direction of the ship, put it in motion, and give a push of 5 to 10 knots an hour. Today it's at 50 knots an hour. And that's what we'll do with this country. So you would see that we'll do this. Then we talk about how will we tackle poverty. I told you that we are going to go bottoms up. There will be 4 to 6 million households we are going to hit with agri loans, with the loans in the urban areas. For the families of these guys to go and catch fish, not just take fish from us. Catch fish, which means enterprise loans. We'll give them housing. We'll give them training for their people in their family. We'll give them health cards. So we are going to tackle for the bottoms up. This is going to hit the poverty right in the belly. Then and so when you talk about 250 billion rupees, probably it's going to cost us more. Because I'm talking about millions intervention, millions of families, and that probably is not going to be a Mickey Mouse, 200-300 billion rupees here and there per year. No, I'm saying intervention of over ₹1 trillion per year, if not more. That is how we are going to change the paradigm. Mr. Rizvi also talked about pension. I've already mentioned. Tariq Parvez Saab, impact of organized crime. I think you're absolutely right. Organized crime, why does it happen? It's all economics. People don't have jobs. They don't have job security. What do? They do, what, most of the civilized people don't do. So I think we've got to, at the grassroots level, handle, their needs, give them what they want. You will start seeing reduction in organized crime automatically. Then, of course, we need to have a national, action plan on crime control. Qazi Saab has talked about whatever he did, and I think I just answered that. In conclusion, I would say that this cannot be done by one person. It will have to be a team effort. It will have to be a team effort within the government, with the opposition in sync on certain areas, and with all of you. Because you see, it will also involve the media. Because at times, media can just go on a tangent. But to date, I've seen them very helpful, very positive. Because you see, I can only just be, a kind of enabler. And all of you will have to partners. I would say over here that I have a great leader in Imran Khan, who basically supports this, who believes in the welfare of, the people, because he believes in the state of Medina, welfare state. and insaf. And I think we are tackling the welfare state. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
Finance Minister, as you heard yourself, there was universal acceptance and applause of your position and the positive vibes that you said. I'm just, before I go to Humayun Saab, Mehtab Haider has been asking me for, I don't know why he didn't raise his hands earlier. अगर मेहताब हैदर आप सुन रहे हैं तो आप बहुत जल्दी सवाल करें.
Thank you. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes.
जी मेहताब, हम बोलो.
Sir, I have two questions, sir. First of all, sir, as you have mentioned that you are going to increase the tax revenues by 1 trillion rupees, and the nominal growth is around 12.8%, but you required growth of almost 20%. How the remaining will come from? And my second question, the second challenge and the biggest challenge for the government is the next year you are going to aim the imports of $55 billion, sir, because imports are now touching $5 billion a month. Sir, how you will tackle this kind of imbalance? Because if we didn't increase our exports, it will become the major challenge after 2 years.
Thank you.
पहले तो I'll handle that question of ये confusion है बड़ा market के बीच में कि यार देखो ये जो है 13% जो है 12.8 4.8 हमारे लोगों ने कह दिया, but I think we are going to hit inshallah if not exceed 5%. तो 13% और 20% के दरमियान 7% कहाँ से आएगा? So my own sense is that you don't understand. I've been saying that we are going to broaden the tax base, whether it is income tax or it is sales tax. And sales tax, even in the income tax, we will use technology to go and figure out people who are not actually. We actually know those people who are not actually paying taxes. Now we are going to reach them and say, hey guys, now we have removed the harassment from the FBR. Now you start paying taxes, or else, if you are willful defaulters, we're going to put you behind bars. So I think there'll be a strong incentive for them to start paying. That's one. The second is that the retail sector, we are going to put technology in place, as I said, POSs, and they're not going to be 10,000 this year. What was this year? We're going to go to first reach the 80,000 and then go up to 500,000 in the next 2 years. That is going to give you a major kicker. And that will basically give you the additionality. I'm very certain, Mehtab, you will see this happening, in the first, 6 months of the next year. And so we are not going to be depending like, previously, that additionality through more taxes, No, that we are not going to do. Yes, we are going to we remove some exemptions, which we believe are misplaced. Otherwise, on the personal income taxes, etc., there will be a very slight change here and there, but not, we are not going to make money out of this. Secondly, how do we pay for the dollars? I can assure you that, with a stronger kind of export momentum on textiles, on IT, and others, as well as now we're going to ramp up, FDI. We are all going to go to the Euro market, Eurobond, we're talking Sukuk, they're waiting for us. We have Sukuks waiting for us. We have Panda bond waiting for us. We have 2 large transactions waiting for us, which one is, these RLNG. I've just tackled that, few days ago. This month, we are going to remove all the impediments, and that RLNG plants will give us, a bit of money. And then we have this, the licenses, the spectrum licenses. That should give us, over $1 billion. So I think we will have enough money, and we will have the balance sheet strength of some institutions like WAPDA, who can go directly to the market, and raise money. So I think, we will have dollars, inshallah.
Thank you, sir.
I wish to thank everybody for a very, which I thought, a productive session. And I hope the finance minister and the participants found it productive too. I will not repeat what has been said by some very illustrious participants. Just that we all know that immediately, if we want growth in our FPR revenue, if we want overall growth in the economy, and if we want to produce jobs, the focus has to be manufacturing. And not only manufacturing, but as Shaukat said, exports related manufacturing. And in exports, as has been mentioned by a number of people who are very experienced in exports, Wajid and Tariq Ikram, amongst others, a buyer-driven FDI. I mean, FDI in a sector where an international buyer comes and invests in a country. And I'd like us to focus, Shaukat, just on China right now and focus on the sectors that are moving out of China, that are moving to Indonesia, that are moving to Vietnam, and textiles is one of them, and appliances is another, and two-wheelers and three-wheelers you have mentioned. Let's get the Chinese to come to Pakistan. Now, you may not like it, there is only one Chinese exporter actually in Pakistan right now. And I know for a fact the others are not coming. Let's focus the CPEC on bringing the Chinese textile sector and the appliances sector and other sectors, because China labor cost is now expensive. It's moving to very rapidly to high technology items. Let's make that a priority. Focus on the service sector. I mean, Shaukat, you remember that in the late 90s, we opened the service sector for foreign direct investment. And look what that has done to the transport, to the motorway services, to the retail, to the wholesale, the social sector, hospitals, education. See what that has done. The introduction of FDI and services, encourage more of that. Now, agriculture, I like your focus on agriculture. You know, pardon my saying, but Mother Nature runs the agriculture sector in Pakistan. You know, good sunshine, good rains, no virus, it does well. We have not done much. It's a tragedy that we have moved so far down in cotton and India has moved so far up. And we all know it happened because of seed, and we did not take timely actions of the right kind of seed. Let us focus. I mean, we are losing our comparative advantage in textile because we are just becoming like Bangladesh. We have to import most of our cotton. So there goes our comparative advantage. And your focus on the IT sector, just a few suggestions. I think the government and the State Bank of Pakistan has done a wonderful job in promoting digitalization in the country. Allow me to make a few suggestions. Let the EMIs and digital banks get involved in cross-border movement of money. I mean, the scrutiny is very tough by State Bank. We all know what needs to be done. Them involved, a lot of overseas Pakistanis still are using informal channels. Imagine what it can do. The freelancers in Pakistan are having one hell of a problem getting their money. Amazon is now coming into Pakistan. Have we thought the traders of Pakistan and Amazon and the PSPs that they use, Payoneer or PayPal, we have to make that bit easy for Pakistan to get involved with the likes of Amazon internationally. Let's focus on some more payment gateways. We just have the micro payment gateway that Karan Dad and State Bank has created. Let's create some more payment gateways. And let me tell you, you see, China moved from a cash society to almost 100% cashless society right now. And they did not use the POSs, although POSs are important, but POSs are expensive. And recently, State Bank has changed the rules and made it more attractive for a POS investor to come and invest. But then you have to change the mindset. The merchant has to feel easy using a POS, getting a POS device to be used, and should not be afraid of FPR. And a customer has to feel comfortable using a debit card on a POS device rather than only on the ATM machine. So this mindset has to be changed and introduce services like, the biggest payments in China are done by the WeChat financing and the Alipay financing. And they are direct from a messenger service, they have become a financial service. And of course, Irfan Wahab Saab was here, but let me say, the telecoms have done a great job, except I would urge the telecoms to move away from only fund transfers and into other mechanisms of supporting the merchants and the supply chain. With that, I'd like to thank everybody, the valued participants, and in particular, Shaukat, it has been very kind of you. We know how busy you are, and we just hope that you find the session productive. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Finance Minister. You've been a huge draw for us. Thank you again, sir.